I'm only going to briefly talk about this because we don't really know what it's going to sort of take shape as. We actually talked about this yesterday as we recorded the Stevie Richards show, and then we've had to scrub the entire segment because apparently I was talking nonsense. But the death of WWE Network, it went live 2014. A couple of years ago, it got sort of amalgamated, if you like that word, with Peacock, and all the archives ended up there. The UI, the interface, the menu system was horrible on the Peacock network, just a total step backwards. And now Netflix has got the archives. So originally what I had said was, well, they're only going to post, the odd pay-per-view here and there. There's going to be no rhyme or reason. Then yesterday, I saw at least 2 years worth of Raws, including a lot, and then there were also Raws from every single year, 13 from 93 or 12 from 98 or something, whatever it might be. And then they've also got all the WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, the King of the Rings, and things like that. So there's a decent starting off point with the archives. The one thing on Netflix is that I don't think they've got their own dedicated menu for navigating all this WWE content. So that's something that needs to be improved.
I was reading the other day, what is that deal worth on Netflix? I read a figure.
$500 million a year.
Yeah, I read it was $5 billion for 10 years.
Yes. Now,
so that's what it is.
Yeah,
$500 million a year.
It's a 10-year deal. It can be cut off at 5 years, or Netflix has the option of extending it to 15 years. So
50?
15, 1-5.
Oh, 15.
Yeah. So, Monday night cable wrestling is dead. It's been going continuously since 1985 with WWF Primetime Wrestling, when it was Jesse Ventura and some other dude, I can't remember his name, and then it went to Gorilla Monsoon, and then the most famous version was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and then they had a couple of crappy iterations for a couple of years, and then they scrapped it, and then it was replaced by WWF Raw. So yeah, that cable wrestling has been going on for just shy of 40 years on a Monday.
And TBS started that, right?
Not on a Monday evening, but I think TBS was the first cable channel.
Yeah, well, that was the first cable.
Yeah.
That's when it started really, I think, getting much, much bigger than what it was just in the territorial days. WTBS, Channel 17, and their big catchphrase was 605. They started all their programs, Channel 17, back in the days when Ted Turner was still running it, at 605. And you know why they did it at 605? They said all the channel clicking was already over. And then when they come live and they running their show, people might stay then.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't try to compete with everybody else because the other shows were wrapping up and they were just starting or something like that. But
Nitro used to do that, They used to start at like 7:57 or something like that. Start 3 minutes early to stop all the channel changing and whatnot. And
that's actually is a pretty good strategy. That was my strategy. I gave it to them, and guess how much money they give me?
$605.
More like $3.02, about half that. But I remember going to Channel 17, we would tape our show early in the mornings, and I don't know, not too early. But one time we were going when we had two companies going. Jim Barnett had one, and I was with the other one, Georgia Championship Wrestling. It was they split, and they would come in there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go in there about 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 12 o'clock, and we were running into each other. They were leaving and we were coming in.
Were you both on cable? Were both shows on cable or different channels?
Yes, back to back.
Huh?
Back to back. One come on at 6:05 or 5:05, then the other follow that was at 6:05. Crazy.
In the early 70s, because I know you started in full-time 72 or around there.
Yep.
Did you, in the early 70s, I mean, how many families, how many households even had cable or even had heard of cable in the early 70s?
Not many. But Ted Turner was he was a pioneer in that. And look what it turned into. So, but he said, but without wrestling, he said Channel 17 wouldn't have survived without wrestling, just locally. So that's where, I mean, he had a huge viewership just in the Atlanta area. Atlanta probably had then 2 or 3 million people. Of course, it went out about 60 or 70 miles. So he was probably doing 2 million. Well, I can't say it because I didn't know what that meant anyway. But he was probably doing 2 million views just locally.
I want to correct myself very briefly there. I said WWF. Oh, no, I'm sorry, because... no, forget it. I was going to correct myself with something stupid.
Really need to put that bottle down.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you what I was going to say is that WWF, before they were on Monday evenings, it would have been Joe Blanchard's territory. But I don't think so because...
San Antonio?
Yeah. But he was on USA Network before Vince was, and Vince ended up buying the slot. But then All American Wrestling replaced that. So I don't know when All American was, but I think it was maybe mornings, I guess. Who knows? I don't know.
Hey, Tully Blanchard and his father, Joe, they had a good show. And I think if they had hit cable, I think it would have caught on. Because they had a good show. I worked out there for a while.
Well, they did. I asked Tully about that. And he just said it was so expensive to run and have cable that they ended up just going in the red really quickly. And I think Joe ended up owing, a lot of money, which is why they ended up selling the slot to Vince.
Yep.
But yeah, I believe it was a good show. I think your old pal Bushwhacker Luke booked for them briefly.
Maybe. But that's the old saying. He said it was so expensive. It's how you make $1 million in the wrestling business. You start with 2 million, give you 2 months, and now you got $1 million. So that's you should get out.
Right then, one more thing, because of all the changes that are going on, we're going to be talking changes with WWE. We're going to be talking changes with AEW later on in the show. But your heart must have sank when Smackdown was announced as going to 3 hours.
Oh my God. Okay, we used to do 3 hours, but we coupled that with AEW an hour. Mm-hmm. So we do 2 hours of SmackDown. This is on my my other podcast at Sportskeeda. But we'd watch 2 hours of SmackDown, then we'd flip right over and we'd catch AEW for another hour.
This is Rampage, which has just been cancelled.
Yes. And I mean, that wears you out because, you don't know and this was the days you didn't even know what you were going to get on SmackDown. You didn't know what you were going to get on Rampage. So you sit there 3 hours and sometimes their ratings were pretty good. This is what I think happened. People would be watching the shows and they'd go to sleep and they'd forget to change the channel. So they didn't have any viewers leaving, but people may be coming in. But I think that sometimes they had some good viewership. But now it's going to be 3 hours of the same show. But I'm kind of interested in seeing it because I think they're going to, at the money that Netflix is paying them, I think they're going to put out a hell of a product. So let's see if they kick it in the butt and go with it because I'd be ready to see that.
Well, that's remaining on USA Network. Smackdown.
Oh, it is staying there.
Yeah. So,
but 3 hours though, right?
Yes, it's going to be 3 hours. Yeah.
So I've read maybe I read it wrong. I thought that SmackDown was going to
no
Netflix.
Raw is going to Netflix.
But wait a minute. But SmackDown's only going to be there 3 months, right?
No. So SmackDown was going to stay on Fox for a bit longer, but then they just let USA Network have it early, I guess.
So okay, Friday night, SmackDown will be on where?
USA Network.
USA.
In America.
Now I got to go.
Raw will be on Netflix.
This is another thing that I bitch about. I can't keep up with the networks or finding them. I mean, my cable system, There's so many different tiers you can buy. So if you're gonna get the same channels, kind of get a cheaper one. So my daughter, that's what she did. But hell, I can't find nothing on it. So, but I can see me tomorrow. They say, "Where were you doing the show?" I said, "I don't know. I I couldn't find it." And then if they don't believe me, I said, "Well, come up here and see if you can find it. Then why don't you do that?" But they're getting a pretty penny, so we'll see what they come up with.
What's the perfect length for a television show, a wrestling television show for you?
Actually, the perfect length, I think, is an hour and a half. Memphis was an hour and a half. So trying to stretch it they got the talent to do it, but trying to stretch it for 2 hours. Now, AEW, they just put out wrestling matches. And I tried to tell a guy one time, he could do everything. It looked good and everything. And he'd go out there and this is years and years ago. I said, yeah, man, you're doing it, but where's the interest? Where's the interest with the people? So, and I've said this 1,000 times, it's a story. It's the story, because if not, you're just watching a wrestling match, and you can watch a great wrestling match, but then the next week they come back, unless you've told something in that first match, you're watching a repeat or a continuation of the same match. Mm-hmm. If it didn't, and if your interest was waning on the first week and nothing happens, your interest is dead on the second week, unless you tell a story with it.
Once again, I'm just plugging the Stevie Richards show here. We talked about World's End AEW pay-per-view, and it was said that the Will Ospreay Kyle Fletcher match might have been the greatest opening match on a pay-per-view ever. And I watched it. I watched it twice back to back, and I could barely remember what happened in it, because it's just like 1,000 other AEW matches.
Yeah,
just like twice in a row. By the way, I watched.
But what purpose did the match have?
It was a tournament match. So Will won, and then he went later on in the night to wrestle Okada, and Okada beat Will.
And